The Mack looks like pure blaxploitation glamour. Fur coats, funky music, and swagger for days. But behind the camera, the real story was darker and stranger than anything that made it to the screen. Real gangsters ran the set. A rival gang threw bottles from rooftops, and the script itself began inside a prison cell. I'm about to walk you through 15 shocking revelations that will change how you see this movie forever. And stay with me, because the final bonus fact is something almost nobody ever talks about. So speed up with me, because the list starts now. Number 1. Script written on prison toilet paper. Some Hollywood origin stories sound too strange to be real, and this one nearly tops them all. Director Michael Campus later confirmed that the Mack's original screenplay didn't start on a typewriter in some cushy office. It came from an inmate named Robert Poole, who wrote the treatment on prison toilet paper while serving time at San Quentin. Poole had reportedly worked as a pimp in Oakland before his conviction, so prison left him with nothing but time, memory, and rolls of tissue to write on. He filled somewhere between 30 and 50 pages, and that treatment eventually carried working titles like Black is Beautiful and The Mack and His Pack. Somehow those fragile pages made their way out of San Quentin and landed in the hands of producer Harvey Bernhard. From there, Max Julian, Richard Pryor, and Campus reworked the material into the script that became a genre-defining film. It's wild to think a movie now studied in film classes began as contraband writing scratched out in a cell block. That's a level of desperation and creativity most screenwriters never have to face. Compare that to how most studio scripts get developed, through agents, pitch meetings, and rewrites funded by executives sitting in air-conditioned offices. Poole had none of that. He had a pencil, borrowed paper, and first-hand knowledge of a world most writers only research from a distance. And this bizarre origin was only the first sign of the chaos still to come. Number 2. The real pimp behind the movie was murdered mid-shoot. Halfway through filming, the production ran straight into real-world violence nobody could script. Frank Ward, the Oakland pimp who inspired the film's lead character Goldie, was shot dead in October of 1972, right in the middle of production. He was killed sitting in his own Rolls-Royce, alongside a female companion, and the news hit the set like a shockwave. Ward wasn't just an inspiration, he was essential to the whole operation. Director Michael Campus had spent 2 months in Oakland earning his trust, and Ward agreed to let the crew film in his territory in exchange for a small role and a payday. He also supplied every extra scene on screen, giving the movie a rawness no casting agency could fake. Rumors swirled that the Black Panther Party was behind the killing, given the friction that had built up during filming. Cast and crew were forced to relocate to safer ground just to finish the shoot. The final film even carries a quiet dedication to Ward in its opening credits, reading simply, "In memory of a man, Frank D. Ward." Most crime films use fake violence to sell tension, but this production had already absorbed the real thing before a single scene wrapped. That kind of blurred line between fiction and reality is almost unheard of in mainstream filmmaking. A real death, folded permanently into a movie about survival on the street. If you are enjoying this, take 2 seconds and leave a like. Subscribe if you want more videos like this. That support really motivates my work and helps a lot with bringing more content. Number 3. Black Panthers threw bottles from rooftops. Filming in Oakland meant stepping into territory the crew didn't fully control, and they found that out fast. Black Panther Party members began hurling glass bottles and trash cans down from rooftops onto the set, a clear message that the production wasn't welcome in their neighborhoods. The danger got serious enough that producer Harvey Bernhard had to step in and negotiate directly with Panther leadership. Bernhard reached out to co-founders Huey Newton and Bobby Seale to strike a deal that would let filming continue safely. The first payment the crew sent actually bounced, which only made the rooftop harassment worse until a real check finally cleared. Once an agreement was reached, Newton and Seale took charge of supplying background extras, meaning many faces in the crowd scenes belonged to actual party members. The producers also agreed to hand over the film's entire opening week profits in Oakland to the Panthers' free breakfast program for children, an initiative that was feeding thousands of kids at the time. A dangerous standoff on rooftops somehow turned into a partnership that fed hungry children. Think about how differently that could have gone. A single, unpaid check nearly turned a film shoot into an actual siege. Instead, a low-budget crime movie ended up entangled in one of the most significant grassroots social programs of the era. Few movies can claim a backstory quite like that. Number 4. Pryor planned a sock full of ball bearings attack. Richard Pryor's temper on set almost led to a real assault that could have ended everything. According to co-star Max Julian, speaking years later on the film's DVD commentary, Pryor got into a furious argument with producer Harvey Bernhard during a shoot day. Both men were livid, and the fight seemed impossible to walk back from peacefully. Later that same night, Pryor loaded a sock with ball bearings, turning ordinary laundry into a crude but brutal weapon, and headed toward Bernhard's hotel room to confront him physically. A sock packed with metal like that can swing like a flexible club, easy to hide, and genuinely dangerous to whoever's on the receiving end. Julian managed to intercept Pryor before he ever reached the door, spending hours talking his friend down from the edge of real violence. Campus later admitted Pryor was brutally difficult to direct, often showing up high or not showing up at all. Yet his final performance still turned out far better than anyone expected. One late-night decision could have derailed the whole production and Pryor's entire career. Instead, the film somehow survived its most explosive moment behind the scenes. Number 5. The producer tried to ban Pryor over an infamous incident before Pryor ever set foot on set. One producer already wanted him gone. Harvey Bernhard fought hard against casting Richard Pryor at all, thanks to a reputation that had already spread across Hollywood. The most damaging rumor involved the 1968 film Wild in the Streets, where Pryor allegedly urinated on veteran actress Shelley Winters during production. That story wasn't some fringe rumor. It followed Pryor from project to project and made plenty of producers hesitant to hire him, no matter how talented he was. Bernhard's fears turned out to be justified once filming began, given the near assault that almost happened later in production. But Max Julian, who co-wrote the script and starred as the lead, refused to budge on casting Pryor as Slim. Julian believed Pryor's lived understanding of street culture was too valuable to lose over gossip, and he ultimately convinced Bernhard to take the gamble. That gamble paid off creatively, even if it nearly caused a disaster behind the scenes. Sometimes the riskiest casting choice ends up being the most authentic one. Number 6. The premiere funded the Panthers breakfast program. The deal that saved production from rooftop chaos didn't end when filming wrapped. As part of the agreement struck with Black Panther leadership, producers committed the film's entire opening week profits in Oakland to the party's free breakfast program for children, turning the local premiere into an unexpected fundraiser. That breakfast program had launched in Oakland back in 1969 and had grown into one of the Panthers' most celebrated community efforts, feeding an estimated 20,000 children daily at its peak nationwide. Every ticket sold that opening week went straight toward feeding hungry kids, instead of into studio pockets, which is a significant sacrifice considering opening week is usually the most profitable stretch for any release. The Mack ended up performing extremely well in Oakland, which meant the donation was far larger than anyone originally expected. This wasn't charity for good press either. It was survival politics, tied directly to the film's own production deal. A crime movie about street hustle ended up quietly funding breakfast for thousands of kids. That's a strange kind of full-circle irony most viewers never learn about. Number 7. The Mack actually outgrew The Godfather in select cities. Nobody expected a scrappy Oakland film to compete with the biggest movie of its era. Director Michael Campus later claimed the Mack actually outgrows The Godfather in specific cities where both films played at the same time. A genuinely stunning claim considering what The Godfather had just accomplished. Released only a year earlier, The Godfather became the highest-grossing film ever made at that point, pulling in somewhere between $250 and nearly $300 million. The Mack, meanwhile, was distributed almost exclusively to theaters in black neighborhoods, deliberately skipping predominantly white markets where distributors assumed it wouldn't connect. The film ended up in roughly 20 theaters total, an incredibly narrow release by any studio standard, yet it drew massive, loyal crowds everywhere it played. Audiences responded to the raw, street-level honesty of the story in a way polished studio dramas simply couldn't replicate. A $250,000 independent film going toe-to-toe with a genuine box office giant says everything about how underserved that audience had been. Studios at the time simply weren't making films that spoke directly to Black audiences with this level of authenticity, so when one finally arrived, the demand had clearly been building for years. Sometimes limited distribution can't hide a movie that truly connects. Number 8, The Players. Ball scene was filmed with real pimps. One of the film's most iconic scenes wasn't staged with actors at all. The legendary Players Ball sequence, where pimps compete in elaborate fur coats and jewelry for the title of Pimp of the Year, was filmed at an actual real-life Players Ball event happening in Oakland, with genuine participants from that world. Filmmakers simply set up cameras at a gathering that was already taking place, capturing authentic outfits, authentic attitudes, and completely unscripted interactions between real attendees. That documentary-style approach gave the sequence a texture no casting call could ever manufacture. The scene's influence didn't stop at the screen either. It helped inspire real annual Players Ball events that began popping up in cities like Chicago starting in 1974, essentially turning fiction back into tradition. It's since been referenced and parodied in other films and shows, cementing its place as one of the most recognized scenes in the entire blaxploitation genre. A single scene shot at a real event ended up shaping real-world culture for decades. Few movies can claim their fiction created an actual tradition. Before we keep going, subscribe if you haven't yet. Drop a comment telling me which movie or show you want me to cover next with strange behind-the-scenes facts. I read every single one. Number 9. The director filmed a controversial scene behind Julian's back. One creative decision on this film still bothers its star decades later. Max Julian, who co-wrote the script and played the lead, discovered that director Michael Campus had filmed a scene without ever telling him, one that Julian has publicly regretted being associated with ever since. The scene showed a racist white cop in bed with a black woman, and Julian only found out after Campus had already shot it, while he wasn't even present on set. When confronted, Campus explained he wanted to expose the cop as hypocritical, someone who couldn't resist the very people he claimed to despise. Julian found that reasoning worse than the scene itself, arguing that Campus had specifically cast an actress based on her size and race to represent decadence, using her body as a shorthand for moral corruption. The actress, Norma McLeod, reportedly wasn't acting when it came to her visible discomfort during filming. To this day, Julian calls it his single biggest regret from the entire project. It highlights a tension that ran through the whole production, one man trying to tell an honest street story, while another pushed for shock value on the side. That friction between authenticity and exploitation shaped a lot of blaxploitation cinema, not just this one scene. It's a reminder that even landmark films carry moments their own creators wish they could take back. Number 10. Tarantino couldn't even find Julian for Pulp Fiction. 2 decades after this film, a legendary director wanted the star back but couldn't track him down. Quentin Tarantino, a huge admirer of both the Mack and blaxploitation cinema generally, reportedly wanted Max Julian to audition for Marcellus Wallace in Pulp Fiction during the early 90s. But by then, Julian had drifted so far out of the industry that nobody could locate him. Unlike contemporaries such as Fred Williamson or Richard Roundtree, Julian never became a lasting mainstream star after this film, gradually fading from Hollywood entirely. According to Samuel L. Jackson, who later shared this story publicly, Julian likely would have turned the role down anyway because of one especially infamous scene involving Bruce Willis's character in a pawn shop basement. Jackson suggested Julian, having built his legacy as cinema's coolest pimp, simply wouldn't have gone near a scene like that, reportedly joking that Julian's whole persona was too dignified for it. The role eventually went to Ving Rhames, who delivered one of Pulp Fiction's most unforgettable performances. It's fascinating to imagine how differently that film might have looked with the original Mack himself in the room. Number 11. Every background extra came from a real gangster's territory. The street authenticity of this film wasn't manufactured through casting calls at all. Frank Ward's influence over the production went far beyond just protection or location access. He personally supplied every single extra scene in the film's street scenes, including the homeless individuals, drug users, pimps, and sex workers populating Oakland's gritty backdrop. Ward's deep connections throughout the city's underground community meant filmmakers never had to fake a single face in the crowd. Rather than hiring actors to imitate that lifestyle, the crew simply let Ward bring in people actually living it, ensuring every extra brought real experience instead of performance. That decision gave the Mack a documentary-level authenticity that traditional studio casting simply couldn't replicate, something audiences at the time immediately recognized as genuine. It's part of why this film still feels distinct from other blaxploitation titles released around the same era, and why its influence on hip-hop culture has lasted this long. Real people, real streets, and zero pretending. That combination is exactly what made the film's world feel lived in. Most films chase this kind of authenticity through months of research and consultants, yet this production simply borrowed it directly from the source. It's a level of realism modern productions rarely even attempt anymore. Number 12. An actress fled to Kentucky after Ward's murder. Frank Ward's death didn't just shake the production, it personally traumatized one of its stars. Carol Speed, who played Lulu and delivered one of the film's most memorable performances, had developed a personal relationship with Ward during filming. His brutal killing in October of 1972 left her so shaken that she felt she needed to leave the entire West Coast behind. The violence surrounding the production, once distant background noise, suddenly became terrifyingly real and personal for her. Speed made the decision to leave California altogether, accepting a role in a low-budget horror film shooting in Kentucky just to put distance between herself and the danger. That film turned out to be Abby, a 1974 blaxploitation horror movie essentially built as a low-budget answer to The Exorcist, swapping in a black family confronting a demonic entity. It wasn't a prestigious production by any measure, but it gave Speed somewhere else to be while she processed real grief and fear. Sometimes an actor's next role has less to do with career strategy and more to do with survival. It's a quieter, sadder footnote hiding behind one of the film's flashiest performances. Number 13. The film exists with two completely different soundtracks. Depending on which version lands in your hands, this movie can sound like two entirely different films. The original 1973 release featured a funky soul score from Motown artist Willie Hutch, music so beloved it later got sampled repeatedly throughout hip-hop history. But a full decade later, distributors reissued the film to cash in on Richard Pryor's exploding popularity and Roger Mosley's newfound fame from Magnum P.I. For that 1983 re-release, Bass Game Relahansi, an entirely new score was commissioned from composer Alan Silvestri, who would later become famous for scoring Back to the Future and Forrest Gump, with vocals added by Gene McDaniels. Fans nicknamed this alternate cut the Mack and his pack, based on a phrase used on the reissue poster. When the film first hit home video through Embassy Pictures, it carried Silvestri's score, but a later DVD release from New Line eventually restored Hutch's original soul soundtrack. Two composers, two completely different moods, and one single movie caught in between them. It's rare for any classic film to carry two fully separate identities depending on which cut you happen to watch. The soul score leans gritty and grounded, while the 80s version leans slicker and more polished, almost like watching the same story filtered through two different decades. Depending on your generation, you may have grown up thinking either one was the real version. Quick reminder to subscribe if you are enjoying these revelations. And tell me in the comments, do you know any strange fact about this movie that I didn't mention? Let's build the list together. Number 14. Pryor wrote his own dialogue during all-night sessions. Richard Pryor didn't just perform his lines, he demanded creative control over every word of them. Pryor made writing his own dialogue a non-negotiable condition of joining the production, leading to marathon overnight sessions, where he crafted authentic street language for his character Slim from scratch. That authenticity came from painful personal history. Pryor grew up in Peoria, Illinois, inside a brothel run by his grandmother, with a father who worked as a pimp, giving him direct lived experience neither Julian nor campus could match. Those late-night writing meetings became a regular fixture of the shoot, with Pryor pulling from real memories and real people he'd known growing up, including the unforgettable idea about locking a man in a car trunk full of rats. Many of the film's most quoted lines trace directly back to Pryor's own contributions, and the entire Players Ball concept reportedly originated from his imagination as well. His trauma became creative fuel that shaped some of the film's most memorable dialogue. It's a reminder that Pryor's off-screen chaos and his on-screen brilliance came from the exact same place, almost at the end, and the best is still coming. Subscribe so you don't miss what's next, and drop your city or country in the comments. I want to see how far this video is reaching. Bonus: the entire film cost just $250,000. Here's the fact almost nobody talks about, the number that ties this whole story together. The entire production of the Mack came together for a budget of just $250,000. An almost unbelievable figure once you consider everything the crew had to survive during filming. From gang tensions to a real murder, that tiny budget had to cover months of shooting across Oakland from September through December of 1972, elaborate pimp costumes, and constant negotiation with two dangerous factions controlling the streets. For comparison, The Godfather, released just a year earlier, cost somewhere between $6 and $7 million. Meaning this film's entire budget was less than 4% of that. The crew stretched every dollar by using real locations instead of sets, letting Frank Ward supply authentic extras instead of paid actors, and letting real pimps bring their own wardrobes to the Players Ball scene instead of renting costumes. Every corner cut on paper somehow became a strength on screen instead of a weakness. A film that outgrew The Godfather in some cities did it for less than 4 cents on the dollar compared to that budget. That's the twist the whole story was building toward: glamour, danger, and legend, made on almost nothing at all. A prison-written script, a murdered inspiration, a rooftop standoff with the Panthers, and a near assault on a producer. All of it happened on a budget smaller than a single visual effects shot in a modern blockbuster. If that doesn't redefine how you see this film, nothing will. And those were 15 strange facts about the Mack. This film matters more than most people realize, not just as a genre landmark, but as a document of real danger, real politics, and real survival happening just off camera. If you made it this far, leave a like, subscribe, and comment which fact surprised you the most. And don't forget to suggest another movie that deserves a list of strange facts like this one. See you in the next video.